and welcome back to another episode of The Jake Williams Show, episode 46. Yes, this podcast still exists. I know it's crazy to think, but I knew it's like a weird time warp that I walked into, because I knew that once the Iowa State Fair was going to roll around, I was going to be very busy, and I was going to dedicate almost all my free time, well, it's not really free time, almost all my time to the Iowa State Fair. So I should have planned ahead and had some pre-recorded episodes, and that's initially what I was going to do. But as you guys know, I'm very scatterbrained, and I don't plan those kind of things well. I love doing the show in the moment, so that's just not in the cards for me. It's just not going to happen. So regardless, here we are, episode 46. And like I said, in the 1 minute I see that I'm uploading, and the next minute I'm like, oh wow, it's the end of August and I haven't put a new episode up yet. Surprising. Very, very surprising. But nonetheless, I am here, and there's so much things to talk about in August. And I thought about multiple angles to go at with this episode. I thought about coming in and talking about the Sony Disney deal, but I feel like everybody that has any sort of online presence has talked about that. And I wanted to come at different angles. I mean, as I'm recording this, August 28th, the Joker trailer dropped, the final Joker trailer dropped, because that's coming out in October, very, very soon. There's, Gears 5 dropped a campaign trailer. I know a lot of people don't talk as much as I think they should about this new Gears game, but I've come out and said I'm a huge fan of it, and I'm really excited for it. There's so many things that I could be talking about. I even tooled around an idea to do a Husker Homer podcast. Away from Paul and away from Brandon, so they can't bully me with their anti-Scott Frost, anti-Nebraska rhetoric that I think is prejudice in central Iowa that needs to be stopped from the people that come from Nebraska, that come here for opportunity and jobs, and then they get treated horribly because they're a Husker fan. It's just not fair. I mean, it makes me want to cry, honestly. On top of all this other stuff, because I'm a psychopath, I launched another podcast for the Loud and Opinionated family. So if you're keeping counts at home, I'm doing 4 podcasts. Of course, this show, Loud Sports, Backcast, and now, just got added this week to the Loud and Opinionated family, Super Cynical Cinema. It's essentially taking the place of the Underachievers. And why I say that is because Chance and Sparks and myself, as much as we love talking about video games and doing that show together, we just realized that at the end of the day, it always came back to the same thing. We always circled back to our favorite pastime, and that was just crapping on bad superhero movies. So we decided, because there's millions of gaming podcasts out there. Hell, there's millions of any sort of podcast that I've been doing. There's millions of those out there. But we thought we could give a different spin on movie podcasts. So we're going to do Super Cynical Cinema. We're basically going through and reviewing superhero movies. Mostly the really bad ones. We'll probably occasionally weave in some good ones that we'll like, but it's mostly going to be bad. And it's, I think, a good spin on the bad movie podcasts subgenre, which is a garble of things that I never thought I would say, because that's just where we are with podcasts, because there's so many, and there's so many really good ones out there. They've created genres and subgenres and then even more subgenres. It's like when you look at a diagram of rock music, and you just have rock and roll, but then you have to draw out a tree for classic rock, draw out a tree for punk rock, heavy metal, hair metal, 80s, grunge. Like it's just like that's what it kind of is. So I think Super Cynical Cinema kind of exists in its own little branched out subgenre podcast. So I'm currently doing 4 podcasts. I hope you listen to them all, and I hope you like them all. I really want your attention, so I have to put out 4 different podcasts to get you guys to do it. I couldn't be more happier. I think there was a point where I thought Loud and Opinionated was in a downturn. a few months ago, and I think it's back and it's going strong, and I can't be more excited. So, all this busy stuff, I've spent 5 minutes of this episode, and I still haven't decided what topic I'm going to do. I think I have it. I am going to talk a little bit. Well, not a little bit. It plays a factor into it. I'm not going to dedicate the whole time to this, but I am going to dedicate time to it. So, I want to talk about Disney. And I don't think there's been any confusion about my stance on Disney as of late. Anybody that knows me personally, have been a friend with me, they know how I feel about the mouse, as I like to call them affectionately. Not really. But Disney is a problem. And I'm not trying to say that jokingly or just as a hipster kind of statement that I hate Disney. That's actually not the case. I like a lot of Disney because, oh yeah, they own everything in entertainment, so it's kind of hard not to like at least something that Disney puts out. And that's the kind of point I'm getting at. That's what I want to drive home about this episode. Disney is an evil empire. And I mean that in the sense of they are the Yankees of entertainment. They had a solid foundation. They've been a huge, and I'm only explaining this for people that don't really like sports, so maybe you're listening to this just because of the title and they don't necessarily like sports, so work with me, I'll explain the metaphor here. But the reason they're the Yankees of the entertainment business is because they're an established brand. They've been, since the 30s, they've been a huge part of Hollywood and entertainment, with Walt Disney and what he did with animation in the creation of his studio. And I'm not saying that they aren't a huge, impactful, important part of the industry. They absolutely 100% are. There's no discrediting that. But I think somewhere along the way, they have encapsulated, not encapitalized. Well, it is capitalism. I was thinking encapsulated and capitalism at the same time. They've encapsulated the problems that you can have when you have a free market that is completely unchecked. Now, I know it's not completely unchecked, but I think this is just, they are a cog in the problem, but I think it's only getting worse because they keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. You see what I'm getting at here? It seems if the antitrust laws and the antitrust courts don't do anything about it, and, you're going to blink one day, and then you're going to realize, oh, yeah, Disney owns that. Disney owns everything. And that's not an exaggeration when I say that. And I've been screaming this on top of rooftops back in December 2017 when they were in talks to buy Fox. I said, this isn't good. You have people, and don't get me wrong, I'm one of these people, that absolutely adore and love the MCU. I am one of those people. Too, by the way. But you have those kind of people that are ecstatic because, oh, great, Fox owns X-Men, so now we get X-Men in the MCU finally. We're going to have these things finally coming together and being a part of it. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds really cool and all, but what are you going to do when that doesn't stop Disney? Because I don't see them stopping. I know a lot of people are like, well, Fox is probably the limit. That's the line. Is it, though? Why would it be? Why would it be? Because Disney already owns Marvel Entertainment, a huge, multi-billion-dollar enterprise in and of itself. And then, in 2012, after they acquired Marvel and they had this, that happened, I think, right before the first Avengers movie comes out. But then on top of that, they go in 2012 and purchased for $4 billion, they purchased Star Wars. And this is where I could see something change. Now, in 2012, me as a Star Wars fan, I was the people that I pointed out for the Fox stuff, I was in that same boat where I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. George Lucas doesn't own Star Wars anymore, so somebody actually knows what they're doing, can control it, and put out good movies. Now, depending on who you ask, that's a questionable statement. as we are now, coming up on Star Wars Episode 9. But that's the problem. We kind of are fandoms and our own excitement for things that we don't realize this is not a good thing. This cannot be good. This could end badly for a number of reasons. Again, in 2012, I didn't see it that way because in 2012, I was like, awesome, more Star Wars, new Star Wars. So now we skip ahead. We move on down to 2017 when Fox gets acquired, and that's really the wake-up call. And the reason I have so much vigor and anger in this episode is because people, when we have something that's good, like the MCU, for instance, where you have Kevin Feige, who knows what he's doing, he's running that ship, and he's done an amazing job. And granted, they're all not great movies. Of the 22 movies that we have from the MCU, but there are a substantial amount of really good movies. I've said it on this podcast. I'll say it on any podcast I go on. In my opinion, and I know this is just me here, and there's no such thing as a perfect movie, but for me, Avengers Endgame, even with all the confusing time travel and all, anything that goes into it, I still thought that was a perfect movie. And that was the best they could have done. So when you bring in the Sony factor, when you have Spider-Man involved with Marvel and Disney, I was again excited to see that Sony was going to let Spider-Man be in the MCU because I knew that they were going to do Spider-Man correctly. And I knew that I was excited. And they've done the best live action version of Spider-Man to date with both of his solo movies that they've made. That they've been a part of. Homecoming and Far From Home are the best live-action Spider-Man movies. Now, I am someone who is in the Raimi camp, and I would argue for Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 3, not so much. I think I still love it for just it's Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi, I have a soft spot for him. But arguably, anybody on the internet is going to say that Far From Home and Homecoming are the two best live-action Spider-Man movies. And the reason I have to have the caveat of live-action is because Spider-Verse, an animated movie, could be considered, and there's always this constant debate, but it could be considered the best Spider-Man movie. So you can understand why people are kind of siding with Disney and saying that they don't want Sony to have full creative control over Spider-Man anymore because they had 5 tries and it didn't work out. So now it's Disney's turn. So people, when the news broke that the deal fell through between Sony and Disney, people immediately rushed to Disney's side without having all the facts. And I was actually one of the first people to kind of back Disney up on this because I misinterpreted the information. I thought it said that Sony wanted more money in the deal, but in reality it was Disney. And this is why, I know this is a long-winded way to get here, but trust me, there's a lot more to this. But this is why I really despise Disney as a company, in a way. I understand this is America, and when you have a business, you have to make money. I totally understand that. That's the whole reason a company exists, to make money. I'll never dispute that. I'll never argue with that. And I'll never argue that competition should be king in this scenario, in a free market scenario like this. I don't disagree with that either. But the reason I get upset with Disney is this is almost, I don't know their exact net worth. I know that Apple was the first $1 trillion company. But if Disney isn't up there, they should be. They had 5 movies in this year alone, in 2019, that reached $1 billion. And now all of a sudden they want a 50-50 split with Sony for Spider-Man? And again, you could argue that Disney might have put in more work than Sony did on Spider-Man, this new version, Tom Holland's. Because they gave Kevin Feige up and had him be a producer and kind of they basically treated Spider-Man like an MCU franchise, like an Iron Man or Captain America. So I could see that side of the argument. Honestly, from this whole split, I saw both sides. I see one side of Sony who's saying, well, why do we need to make a deal with them? We still have Spider-Man. He's a huge bankable property. Why split money with another company and just make our own movie? And that was before the MCU was involved. People tend to forget that Amazing Spider-Man 2 made $750 million. Venom made $800 million. And that's just because of his... I think there's multiple reasons. I mean, I think people probably went to go see it because they thought it was going to be a garbage fire. I think people might have thought Spider-Man might show up. But it's also because his relation to Spider-Man. He's a Spider-Man character, essentially. People care so much about that they'll go see it. So in Sony's mind, why would you want to split that? If Far From Home makes $1 billion, and I got to give credit to Collider Live because I think they did a great segment about this, and this is what I'm almost pulling that from them because the arguments made in that segment that they talked about is kind of putting my line of thinking into perspective. So I have to give credit where credit's due. I'm not stealing this from them. I'm just saying their math is what I'm using here because it makes the most sense. Far From Home made $1 billion. And if they had that current deal in place, Sony and Disney had that deal in place, that's $500 million to each studio. Anybody else? Guys like me, who I don't think will ever see that kind of money in their lifetime. That's a lot of money. Great, yeah, sure. But when you look at Sony, when they have Amazing Spider-Man 2 or Venom that make $800 million, and they see all of that money, why would you go into that deal? And I think that's the problem. I think Disney, being a greedy company that they are, asked for way too much money. 50-50 split. It's ridiculous. Also, we tend to forget from that Spider-Man deal that they already have in place, they got all the merch. They get all the merch from Spider-Man, and Spider-Man being in those Avengers movies, they got the money for that. Sony didn't. And Marvel's just a little pissy because they only got 5% of opening weekend gross, which, by the way, is the most profitable time period for a movie, is its opening weekend. Because then it dictates on public opinion and critics' opinion of whether or not to go see it. You know how this works. So I don't know who exactly pulled out of the deal. It fell through. My money is on Disney. Did they go too high? Probably. I don't think you would go that. I think that's ridiculous to go 50%. And then I saw somewhere that there was reports that Sony offered a 70-30, which again, if you're only getting 5%, you're getting 25% more than what you would have already been getting. Which, if you're doing the math, if we're going by a 30%, if you would make 30% of that, you take the $1 billion that Spider-Man would have, that's still $300 million you're making out of that. Just by having him say something related to your universe, saying, maybe having Nick Fury show up, or maybe that's still... And it could be, I don't know. The thing is, I think both companies are a little bit silly, but I think, for me, I side more with Sony because when it boils down to it, I think Disney also did something kind of dirty here. Now, say that they had this in mind. Kevin Feige openly talked about it at the D23 Expo, where he said that it was never going to last forever. It was a finite amount of time. If that were the case, Disney did something dirty by establishing Tom Holland so ingrained in the MCU. So when Sony has to make a solo movie, say Sony's like, okay, that was great, thank you so much. Let's move on. We want to go in a different direction with Tom Holland. Now it's confusing to audiences, and it's confusing to everybody. Is this still the same Spider-Man? Is he somehow kind of connected in the MCU? So if he's not going to be in future Disney movies, is he still the same guy? Are we going to have to reboot again? That's kind of a dirty move. Because now you put Spider-Man in a weird place. And I think that was a plan from Disney to kind of do that. Now, I don't think that it's a horrible thing. I think it was kind of dirty, kind of a smart business move, but I do think it's a little shady, and I think it adds to the mythology of what I've been saying. Disney is an evil empire. And I don't mean that like they're a horrible, dirty, nasty company. I mean that in a sense that they cannot keep going at the rate they're going. We cannot, if we want, not everybody should own everything. I think this is good that Sony takes Tom Holland away and Spider-Man away, because Disney should not own all this stuff. No company should have 5 movies that gross over $1 billion like that. If they're good, and these aren't the best movies. It's ridiculous that they've claimed all this stuff. You talk about how, everybody was rooting for Avengers Endgame to beat Avatar on the all-time box office, right? What are you rooting for? Because it's Disney beating itself. It's ridiculous, and Disney has such a mind share in this in this business that if you look from now until 2027, a few months ago, when they released that schedule of their future releases, from now until 2027, every other week is a Disney movie. And I'm not exaggerating at all. Every other week is a Disney movie. And some of them are remakes, like Mulan, and you add to the other movies, but even movies that I didn't know that were Disney movies because of this Fox merger are Fox movies. Also, on top of that, did you realize when they merged with Fox that wasn't the best for everybody? Thousands of people lost their jobs because of this merger. Why have somebody on the payroll and be a part of this? And we already have that. Why would you? Why would you do that? I mean, look at last year, even. I mean, you go back to May. We start with Avengers Endgame in August, or April. Goodness, now I'm in August, man. Fired up. In April, but then you look at May, you had Aladdin. Then Dark Phoenix was June 7th. Technically, that's not really a Disney movie because it was made by Fox, whatever. Then 2 weeks later, you had Toy Story 4. Then they had Fox's comedy Stuber, that again, Disney technically makes money from that because they bought Fox. The Lion King, July 19th. And then it keeps going. We move into Ready or Not, which is a Fox Searchlight movie, which is owned by Disney. When you look at Ad Astra, the Brad Pitt movie, actually looks pretty good. The New Mutants, which who knows what they're going to do with that. Artemis Fowl next May in 2020. The list can go on, and these are, again, as I was looking at that list, those are movies that I totally did not realize were Disney movies because of all the Fox acquisitions. So let's look at 2019, going back to May. We had Aladdin, May 24th. 2 weeks later, Dark Phoenix. 2 weeks later, Toy Story 4. A little bit longer, Stuber, again, because that's more of a Fox movie than a Disney movie, but it's still a Disney movie. The Lion King, a week after Stuber. The Art of Racing in the Rain, August 9th. Who cares about that movie? Ready or Not, that just came out. Ad Astra, that'll be coming out in September. The Woman in the Window, October 4th. October 18th, Maleficent. November 15th. See, that's kind of normal. But then we move down. So we get The King's Man. Week after that, Call of the Wild. 2 weeks after that, Onward, the new Pixar movie. 3 weeks after that, Mulan. A week after that, the New Mutants, but who knows if that will actually come out in April because that movie's been tossed around. Eternals. Artemis Fowl. The Eternals, by the way. Another Pixar movie. Again, this is from May, so it hasn't been necessarily fully updated. But you see my point. It keeps going. It does not stop. Every other week, sometimes back-to-back weeks, it's a Disney movie. At some point, we got to start looking at this antitrust court, and they have to get serious about mergers. Because these mergers are not good. I mean, look at Time Warner. And AT&T with, getting DirecTV and the whole AT&T merger and Time Warner and all these things, they're not good for you. How are we supposed to get any original new ideas from anything if it's going to be constantly buried and pushed down and down and down and down and down because you have corporations like Disney or corporations like Time Warner or any sort of thing where there's no chances for a smaller company or smaller group. We like to think that in America we have this idea of the American dream and that anybody could do it. You guys pull yourself up from the bootstraps. How is that possible when, say, you have a small indie movie that you want to get to, say, I don't know, couple hundred, maybe thousands of screens, and you want to go to like New York or Chicago or maybe some LA, get those places and get that screening there. Good luck, because you, as an independent filmmaker, have no chance. None, because you do not have the marketing budget or the overall gigantic machine that is, say, a Disney. Or even a Sony. I mean, they're not innocent in this, by the way. Sony is still a big company that's not innocent in everything. I would like to point that out, that they're also to blame for this. I just think Disney is more at fault than Sony in this scenario. We cannot keep letting stuff like this happen. No company should have that much stronghold in any business. I said this months ago when I talked about big tech, when I talked about the big four with Google, Facebook, Apple, Twitter. Something has to change. You can't let these companies completely dominate and run an industry. Quite frankly, if you had, and again, you could have people, bitch and moan. I did my best not to swear, I'm sorry. But yeah, people complain and whine about free market. I truly do understand that, the free market. But I also don't think people think about monopolies. Disney is a borderline monopoly. When you own every week, every other week, sometimes every week in a month, how is that not considered a monopoly? Not only do you have Marvel, you have Star Wars, you have Pixar, which has always been a huge thing. Think of what you got from Fox. You got Aliens. You've got Predator. You've got Avatar. You've got X-Men. You've got Fantastic Four. And now you're launching a streaming service who, by the way, is impressive that they're doing this money-wise because they're going right. Disney is not just trying to compete. They're trying to just annihilate their competition. Because guess what? I totally forgot to mention this. They have Disney Plus. Okay, I understand. Streaming service, streaming wars. Oh, did you know that they have majority stake in Hulu? Who's always been Netflix's prime competition. Not Prime, by the way. Netflix's biggest competition in Hulu, that's owned by Disney. Disney owns everything. Entertainment, sports, news. They own everything. But we'll let it go because we want X-Men in our Avengers movies. And we want Spider-Man. It's getting to be ridiculous. It really is. And I know this is probably maybe the third topic I've done on something like this. I talked about that we had 2 streaming services, I think, back in like November. And I think a few months ago I talked about the big tech stuff. I'm serious. This stuff has to stop. In my view, it's anti-American. Because you're just stomping on the little guy. Maybe it is more American than I think. You've got Prime running stores out of business, and now you've got Disney just buying up and taking over everything. So how do they compete with Netflix, who has a $13 a month price point? I believe, I could be wrong on that, but that's their price point now. What does Disney do? We'll do that. We'll do a $13 price point, but it's Disney Plus bundled with Hulu Plus and ESPN Plus. Oh, guess what? We'll make it even more of a competition where you can buy 3 years of Disney Plus for like $4 a month. Which that's not going to stay the same, people. That's to get early adopters to suck up this in and take it and go with it. And the reason they could compete and probably run Netflix out of business because they have all these properties. You're like Predator, you can't watch it on Netflix, but we can throw it up on Hulu. We could throw it up on Disney Plus. You want anything that... Pretty soon, Netflix is not going to have anything, and it's just going to have to focus on original content. Now, that's not a horrible thing for Netflix to focus on just original content. That's fine. But this is the problem. When you start doing these streaming wars and doing these kind of tactics that like Disney's doing, and granted, I know I've been really hard on them. They're not the first ones to do this. I like competition. Competition makes things better. It does. But when you're full-on sniping at another company and actively destroying some of their best products, I don't think they destroyed them necessarily, but again, business-wise, I understand why Marvel wouldn't keep their Netflix shows. I get it. And because they own so much mindshare in the business, it's almost... And I know it sounds super first-world problems because of the nature of this whole episode, but when you think of it this way, and you're someone like me that loves superheroes, loves movies, and just wants everybody to get along, it's not possible because they're owned by corporations, they're owned by companies, they want to make money. But when you see something like Daredevil, which was a fantastic show, I absolutely adore Daredevil, I'm never going to see that again. It's never going to happen. It's never going to get a chance at Season 4, because Season 3, the views, the numbers were abysmal because people knew that Disney was going to take the toys back. And it's almost like we forget. We have such a short memory of when Marvel was bankrupt and was selling off all their properties. And now they've got all their properties back, and they're actively just saying nope, 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 and just ripping things away from people. I understand it. Marvel thinks they can make more money with their properties. I get it. They own the rights to it. They can have it. I totally understand that. But because of that, they've actively ruined any viewership they had of Jessica Jones. Granted, I wasn't going to watch Jessica Jones. Daredevil is really the only one that I liked. But Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, the Defenders in general, Iron Fist, that stuff, forget about it. Nobody wanted to watch it because they knew it was going to be gone. Gone. I think this is a sign that we need to change things. People cut the cord and started doing Netflix and streaming because price in the first place. You can't even bundle it if you want. Like, can you have options for bundles? I guess I didn't research that, but what if you don't want ESPN Plus? What if you don't want Hulu Plus? You just want Disney Plus? Still, that's another expense, you know? Even if you went for the $13 package, why would you have ESPN Plus if you don't like sports? You're already paying for Hulu, and say you want to live in a world where you don't want to miss anything, you got some seriously bad FOMO. You get HBO, you get Netflix, you get Hulu, you get Disney Plus because you really want to see the new Star Wars show because you really like Star Wars. Oh, you want to see Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, you really want to see that. Well, Scarlet Witch is in it, and we would strongly advise that you watch that show WandaVision because that ties directly to this movie. Oh, we're going to make another this hasn't been confirmed, but I think it's kind of obvious. We're going to make another Captain America with Falcon as the Captain America. But you're going to be really lost if you see this movie without seeing Falcon and Winter Soldier. So you have to buy that if you really want to enjoy this movie, to fully enjoy this movie. You're the biggest Captain America fan, and you're not quite sure about Disney Plus and getting into that. Well, you better watch it because it's really going to hurt your experience with Captain America. I could talk about this all day, about how frustrated this makes me, because it really does. And I think people are slowly but surely opening their eyes after the Spider-Man Sony deal kind of fell through. I think people are slowly starting to get it, that no one company should have this much control in any level of media, whether it be entertainment or sports or news or what have you. And I truly mean that. And I know that people think I hate Disney. like I said at the top, it's hard to hate Disney because they own all the properties I like. I just don't. I hate when a company has this much dominance. And I think, yes, there can be a free market, but there also has to be a free market with some rules, because that's why antitrust existed in the first place. That's why monopolies don't exist in the first place, or shouldn't. That's the theory. Because it's going to just eat itself if it goes completely unchecked. And I know people hate regulations, and I hate that idea, but we should start thinking more about that, because pretty soon your house is going to be owned by Disney, or your car is going to be owned by Disney. It's a joke. I honestly don't think it'll be that extreme, but it could be. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Jake Williams Show. Maybe a once a month. Goodness, I can't talk. Once monthly podcast at this point, I guess. Thank you so much. Episode 46. Do you stand with Disney? Do you not think Disney is this giant corporation and that I'm just insane? Some of you might think that. Some of you might think I'm also insane that I'm this obsessed about complaining about Disney, and I totally agree with you. But again, it's kind of hard not to talk about Disney when they have so much power. Thank you so much for listening. Listen to the other podcasts on Loud and Opinionated. Trust me, they're not like all about complaining about Disney. I promise. Loud Sports, Batcast, Super Cynical Cinema, all that stuff. And most importantly, even if you love Disney and you think I'm in the wrong, you gotta just look at yourself in the mirror and you gotta say these two things: be loud and be proud.